At my dad's funeral, my sister-in-law said my husband gets the company and $500 million. My dad chuckled in the coffin. Because my brother is broke. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Collection in Chicago was designed to absorb sound. Thick velvet curtains, hand-woven carpets, acoustics meant to keep secrets. But today, it was silent for a different reason. My father, Robert Sterling, lay in a closed mahogany casket at the front of the room. The air was heavy with expensive perfume and performative grief. And then, Samantha broke it. She was standing near the front, clutching a glass of champagne she shouldn't have had, talking loudly to a man from our biggest competitor. "Oh, Tyler is selling immediately," she announced, her voice cutting through the somber quiet like breaking glass. "He's inheriting the whole empire today. 500 million. We're moving to Monaco next week." She laughed, a bright, greedy sound. And then, from the front of the room, another sound answered her. A dry, distinct chuckle, coming directly from the casket. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The gasp that sucked the air out of the grand ballroom wasn't born of grief. It was pure, unadulterated fear. For a split second, the hospitality elites of Chicago thought Robert Sterling had cheated death, but I knew better. The logic of the moment was purely mechanical. I had programmed the sequence myself 72 hours ago. A low hum vibrated through the floorboards as a massive, high-definition LED wall descended from the rafters behind the casket, cutting through the shadows like a guillotine blade. On the screen, my father's face flickered to life, frozen in a loop of that dry, knowing amusement. The chuckle played again, digital and crisp. Samantha dropped her champagne flute. The crystal shattered against the parquet floor, the sound sharp and violent in the sudden hush. She spun around, her eyes wide, hunting for someone to blame. She looked at Tyler. Tyler looked at the coffin, his face draining of color. But my focus was elsewhere. I locked eyes with Richard, my father's chief of staff, standing like a sentinel by the double mahogany doors at the rear entrance. I gave a single, imperceptible nod. Richard didn't hesitate. He pressed a button on the wall panel, and the magnetic locks engaged with a heavy final thud. The sound echoed off the vaulted ceiling. We were sealed in. Grief is usually a heavy, suffocating fog. But standing there, watching them panic, the air felt crisp, surgical. This wasn't a funeral anymore. It was a board meeting, and I was the only one with the agenda. I stepped out from the shadows of the colonnade. My heels sank into the plush carpet, muffling my approach, making me a ghost in my own right. I walked past the rows of stunned investors, past the competitors circling like vultures, past my brother who was still gaping at the screen with his mouth open. I ascended the 3 steps to the podium. I placed my tablet on the lectern next to the microphone. I didn't look at the casket. I looked directly at Samantha, who was now trembling in her designer dress. "Please, take your seats," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but amplified by the room's acoustics, it commanded absolute silence. "The service is over. The audit has begun. Grace." "What are you doing?" "Get down from there," Tyler hissed, finally finding his voice. He stood up, smoothing his Italian silk suit, trying to reclaim some semblance of authority. "This is Dad's funeral, not your personal stage." "Sit down, Tyler," I commanded, refusing to even look up from my tablet. My finger grazed the glass surface, and the image behind me changed. The looping video of my father vanished, replaced by a complex organizational chart of the Sterling Collection. My name was at the top. Tyler's wasn't even on the page. "For 10 years, I began, my voice echoing slightly. I have been the ghost in the machine of this company. While you were posting photos from yachts in the Mediterranean, I was in the basement of the London property, figuring out how to retrofit the HVAC system without shutting down operations. While you were networking at Fashion Week, I was renegotiating our union contracts to prevent a strike that would have crippled us. I looked out at the sea of faces, investors, board members, employees. You see the Sterling name on the building, and you assume ownership implies competence. But in this family, we have two very different definitions of wealth. There is being asset rich, and there is being lifestyle rich. I gestured to the screen, where two columns appeared. My brother and his wife are lifestyle rich. They believe wealth is a performance. It's the clothes you wear, the cars you lease, the dinners you buy to be seen buying them. It is a hollow shell, a costume rented on credit. It consumes value. I tapped the screen again. The column under my name filled with data points, properties acquired, debts serviced, operational efficiency increased. Being asset-rich is boring. It's invisible. It is the plumbing, the contracts, the late nights, the deferred gratification. It is the engine that generates value. For a decade, I have been the engine, and Tyler has been the leak in the fuel tank. Samantha stood up, her face flushed with indignation. How dare you? We represent this brand. We are the face of the Sterling collection. No, Samantha, I corrected her, my tone dropping to a clinical chill. You are the expense report. And as of this morning, your account has been closed. Closed? Samantha scoffed, looking around the room for validation, trying to rally the crowd with her usual socialite charm. Don't be ridiculous, Grace. You're the VP of operations. You fix the elevators. You don't make executive decisions. I do when the board gives me emergency power of attorney, I said. Which they did at 8 in the morning. The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. My mind flashed back to just 4 hours prior. I was in the executive suite, reviewing the final security protocols for the funeral, when Tyler stormed in. He didn't knock. He never knocked. Samantha was right behind him, already wearing her black morning dress, though she was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. We need the keys to the penthouse safe, Tyler demanded, ignoring my presence entirely. And the codes for the offshore accounts. We're meeting with the buyers from Omnicorp this afternoon. Omnicorp? I had asked, keeping my voice level. They strip assets for parts, Tyler. They'll fire the entire staff. They'll turn the Sterling into a budget chain. So what? Samantha snapped, snapping her compact shut. We're selling. We're taking the cash and moving to Europe. We deserve a break after putting up with your father's micromanagement for years. Putting up with it? I stood up slowly. He paid your credit card bills every month. He bailed you out of 3 failed startups. He bought you that dress. And now he's gone, Tyler sneered, leaning over my desk. Which means I'm in charge. You're just the help, Grace. You always have been. You might share the last name, but you don't have the vision. Now give me the keys, or you're fired before the body is even cold. That was the moment. The instant I realized there was no redemption for them, no grief, no respect, just a hunger to consume everything my father had built, everything I had protected. Back in the ballroom, I looked at my brother. He was sweating now, the arrogance melting into panic. You wanted the keys, Tyler, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. You wanted to know where the money went. I pressed a key on the tablet. The organizational chart on the massive screen vanished, replaced by a dense, scrolling spreadsheet. Rows and rows of numbers, dates, and vendors cascaded down like digital rain. This, I said, is the ledger of sins. A murmur rippled through the room as people squinted to read the entries. August 12th, 2018. Private jet charter to Ibiza $85,000, coded as site inspection. There are no Sterling properties in Ibiza. I pointed to another line. December 24th, 2020. Jewelry purchase. Cartier $250,000, coded as client gifts. Samantha, I believe that's the necklace you're wearing right now. Samantha's hand flew to her throat, covering the diamonds. February 14th, 2022. I continued. Relentless. Wire transfer to consulting firm $500,000. The firm is registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The sole signatory is Tyler Sterling. Tyler lunged forward, but Richard stepped in his path, blocking him with the immovable presence of a stone wall. This is private! You can't show this! Tyler screamed. It stopped being private when you tried to sell my employees' pensions to pay for it, I countered. We did the forensic accounting. Tyler, over the last 10 years, the two of you have borrowed $12.5 million from the company. You treated the operating budget like your personal piggy bank. I looked at the board members sitting in the front row. Their faces were grim, angry. They had suspected, but they had never seen the proof. Now it was undeniable. You wanted to know where the money went? The question hung in the air, weighted by the evidence behind me. It went to your ego. It went to your vanity. And every cent of it was an advance on your inheritance. That's a lie, Samantha shrieked. Dad promised us. He said he would take care of us. He did, I said. He took care of your debts. He took care of your mistakes. And he kept a receipt for every single one of them. I tapped the screen one last time. The spreadsheet disappeared. In its place, a single video file icon appeared. And now, I said, he's going to tell you exactly what that cost you. The video file opened. The room went pitch black, save for the massive screen glowing with the image of Robert Sterling. He was sitting in his study, the familiar leather armchair swallowing his frail frame. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, lucid. He looked directly into the camera lens, which meant he was looking directly at Tyler. Hello, son. His digital voice rumbled, filling the silent ballroom. If you're watching this, it means you tried to take the throne before you learned how to build the kingdom. Tyler stared up at the screen, transfixed, his face pale. I have a confession to make, my father continued. I failed you, not by being too hard on you, but by being too soft. I was afraid to lose your love, so I bought it. Every time you asked for money, every time you made a mistake, I wrote a check because it was easier than teaching you the consequences. I thought I was being generous. I was being a coward. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the projector. I created a man who believes he is entitled to the harvest without ever planting a seed, Robert said, his voice cracking slightly. And that is why I chuckled. Because you asked for the company, Tyler. You asked for the burden of 5,000 employees and their families. And you thought it was a prize. He leaned forward, the camera zooming in on his weathered face. I cannot let you destroy my life's work. And I cannot let you destroy yourself any further with easy money. So, I am giving you exactly what you asked for. I am giving you the lifestyle you think you deserve. He paused, a sad smile touching his lips. But remember, son, a watchman who falls asleep at the gate doesn't just lose his job, he loses the city. I am awake now, and this is my final act of parenting. The screen faded to black, leaving only the sound of Tyler's shallow, panicked breathing echoing in the dark. The will, Richard announced, his voice slicing through the heavy silence left by the video. He stepped forward, holding a document sealed with red wax. To my daughter, Grace. He read, I leave the entirety of the Sterling collection, including all operational assets, brand rights, and the controlling interest in the board. Valuation, $600 million. A collective exhale went through the room. I felt a weight settle onto my shoulders, not a burden, but an anchor. I looked at Richard, and he gave me a rare, small smile. And to my son, Tyler, Richard continued, I leave the Sterling Manor. Tyler's head snapped up. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flared in his eyes. The manor? He stammered. The estate in the Hamptons? But that's worth $50 million easily. He grabbed Samantha's arm. We can sell it. We can flip it and start over. Read the rest, Richard, I said quietly. Richard adjusted his glasses. The bequest of the Sterling Manor comes with the following conditions. The property is designated a historical landmark and cannot be renovated or altered. Furthermore, a restrictive covenant has been placed on the deed. The property cannot be sold, leased, or leveraged for a period of 10 years. Tyler's face went slack. What? It gets better, I said, stepping down from the podium to face him. The manor requires approximately $2 million a year in maintenance, insurance, and property taxes. And since you have no income and $12 million in debt to the company, I'm curious how you plan to pay the heating bill. Tyler looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. He realized the trap. It wasn't an asset, it was a prison. Buy me out, he begged, his voice cracking. Grace, please. Buy me out. I'll take 10 cents on the dollar. Just get me out of this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single envelope. This is the bill for the first quarter's property tax, I said, pressing it into his hand. It's due on Monday. I suggest you start looking for a job. Tyler and Samantha didn't scream. They didn't fight. They just withered. Escorted out by the very security team they had threatened to fire an hour ago. As the heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind them, the air in the grand ballroom changed. The oppressive weight of the last hour lifted, replaced by a tentative, fragile silence. I looked out at the faces of the staff, the bellhops, the managers, the chefs who had fed my father for 30 years. They looked terrified. They thought I was the new tyrant. I stepped back up to the microphone, but this time, I leaned in close. My father taught me that a watchman protects the city, I said, my voice steady. But I learned that a leader feeds it. I looked at Richard, who gave me a nod of encouragement. For too long, the value of this company was siphoned off to fund a lifestyle that none of you shared in. That ends today. I picked up the final document from the lectern. This is the new charter for the Sterling Collection. Effective immediately, 20% of all annual profits will be diverted into an employee ownership trust. You don't just work here anymore. You own a piece of the foundation you built. The shock in the room broke into whispers, then applause, real applause, not the polite, hollow clapping of high society, but the raucous, relieved sound of people who had just been given a future. I walked down the steps and stood with Richard. Watching the room come alive, I realized that the satisfaction I felt wasn't from seeing Tyler fail. It was from seeing everyone else succeed. Revenge isn't just about destroying the weeds. It is about replanting the garden so that something better can take root. True power isn't the ability to hoard resources. It is the ability to grow something that shelters others. My father had the last laugh, but he gave me the last word. And that word was legacy. If you believe that true legacy is what you build, not what you take, share this story. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own future?